there's very little doubt that the level of engagement and the kind of appetite for political engagement this time around is unique. Now, very simply, it might be because of Gaza and because of how the main political parties responded to the Israeli aggression and genocide in Gaza. That's understandable. But there are also many other local drivers that are making people feel that there is a change that is much needed, much required, much desired. And therefore, this and you know, I've been part of several you know, sort of organizing the campaign, the voting patterns or the such in the past. But this time seems absolutely different. It seems unique in terms of the scale of interaction, in terms of the kind of discussion that's happening. Do you see the same?
Absolutely. What we see is a generation of people from all backgrounds who the political system has just ignored. Brexit was the first kind of time we saw this, right, where politicians treated voters as if they were better than them. They knew, you know, and they talked down to them. And in essence, they lost a very important referendum because they didn't understand the people that they were talking to, the voters that they were talking to. Very recent polls have shown that only 12% of people trust the major parties in this country. So Labour will win the next election, probably inevitably. But that doesn't mean that people trust the Labour Party. People aren't voting for the Labour Party out of joy and happiness. They're voting for the Labour Party because the Conservative Party has spent 13 years now driving the country into the ground, right? The economy into the ground, the NHS. People struggle to get GP appointments. Our education system is suffering. University is now as expensive as ever at the cost of living crisis. So there is an accumulation of issues which have really made people feel like we need a change. We need a better system out there, right? This is not only expressed through the Muslim vote. There are movements out there. If we look at what's happening in Keir Starmer's constituency, a very clear effort to organize against him. And this is not because, you know, they hate Keir Starmer. It's because they do not like what he stands for, what he's standing for, the policies he's proposing. And, you know, it's about taking this momentum.
So was it that, I mean, was Gaza a sort of projection of the kind of politics that Keir Starmer and Labour might bring?
Absolutely. I think Gaza was the red line. It was the confirmation of our worst fears, that the Labour Party has become a party of the establishment that has lost its roots with the working class, with its communities. You know, recent polling has shown over 70%, right? The overwhelming majority of people in this country support a ceasefire. In November, when they had an opportunity to vote for one, 81% of our MPs failed to vote for a ceasefire. Labour went to the extent of removing people from their front bench if they voted for a ceasefire. Yeah. So it's quite clear to all of us that really the Labour Party has just become obsessed with this quest for power, and they don't really have any, you know, ideological underpinnings about what they want to achieve. They have no real solutions to the questions this country faces.
It is. I mean, you point to something which is quite interesting, and I see a very similar discussion happening not only here in the UK, but also across many countries, particularly those who this year are coming to elections, particularly the United States, for instance. I mean, you hear the same thing. The issue is that, I mean, we're going to talk about whether the Arab communities or the Muslim communities or the such and their organic interest in obviously Gaza, but more widely speaking, people seem to be totally bewildered by a political system that is hailed as supremely democratic, yet ultimately, you know, you're tied with one of two fairly bad choices.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of freedom that ultimately everyone has. You can either choose to waste your vote or to vote for one bad, one who's worse.
Yeah.
It's that's filling people with well, I mean, I've heard several times people saying, you know, we're just tired of this.
Yeah.
And it's just like a perpetual cycle that never ends. In America, I mean, they're having Biden and Trump. I mean, what kind of choice is that? And then this is hailed as the greatest democracy on earth.
Yeah, I think the electoral system that we have, right, the first past the post, it has really limited our imaginations. And what's really unique about this election is that for the first time we're seeing a real independent movement, right? Independents who genuinely maybe don't have a chance of winning now, but if we build the infrastructure, we support them, we help build them career, they can win in 2029, 2034. We have data to strongly suggest, apologies for that.
Carry on.
That this is possible.
Yeah, don't worry.
Let me just put it on mute. That this is possible, and there is a real chance that going forward, if we do this correctly and if we build a strong and sustainable movement, that these independents can become a real significant part of the electoral life in UK and Parliament. We just have to take that first step, right? Take that first step of building up people, and they don't have to be inside a party infrastructure. That is not necessarily the way forward. What we want to see is a vote which is flexible. For far too long, I think Muslims in the UK, we made the decision. We put all our eggs in the Labour basket. Apart from the Respect Party for a brief period, we put all our eggs in the Labour Party. All our strongest activists went to the Labour Party. All our brightest minds in politics went there. And then when they betrayed us, we kind of were like, well, what do we do now? So here now we have an opportunity to build infrastructure independent, of that, and have our vote move to whoever is most in line with our views. And I think that's really key, that we build that, because a party can change its position, but a community will always hold on to its principles. It's a community which is solid in its principles, that can move to whichever individual or party best matches those principles, is a community that has the best opportunity for success.
From early on, I mean, I don't know, back in December probably, I predicted that soon we'll see sort of a shift within the major parties and people starting to call for a ceasefire. Okay? And that's what happened. And that's what usually happens when it's far too late and it's far too little. And for that reason comes the importance of local issues, of issues that pertain to the NHS, the health sector, education, transport, housing, the elderly, pensions, the cost of living crisis. I mean, now it's become something that trips quite easily off the tongue simply because it's so common. I mean, the fact that we have probably the most flourishing business today is the food banks. I mean, it's the only thing that's growing almost day after day. And it's quite absurd. Someone sent me a leaflet dropped through their mailbox by their local MP, I believe it was. And it was, the main picture was them cutting the ribbon of a new food bank in their high street. I mean, that was something that particular official felt was an achievement. The fact that millions of people can't feed their children nutritious meals, the fact that almost 1 million children don't eat if they don't go to school, and so on. I mean, it's an array of issues that people are concerned with. But it seems somehow that the thing that brought all this together was Gaza. I mean, it was this that everyone, started airing their grievances, the issues that they're suffering from, the problems stemming from the position on Gaza. It's as though Gaza provided some sort of moral compass.
It was I would say Gaza was a catalyst.
Yeah.
And somewhat, I would take it's as seeing the best in our communities. The fact that they, despite their own suffering, with the cost of living, they weren't really interested in causing a big, ruckus, and they were accepting, to some extent, when I was talking to people that, look, the Labour Party might provide an alternative, not the best alternative as well, but provide an alternative. It was the fact that the Labour Party, whether directly or indirectly, one can argue, supported what has now been described as potential genocide was the red line. And I think, people have tried to twist this to say that Muslims don't care about domestic issues. I would say this is a sign of the selflessness of the Muslim community. That it was the death of others that sparked them to say, enough is enough. And this is where we're at now. Enough is enough, right? I mean, look, the other day someone was just telling me they saw our local MP where I live in a food bank. I don't think they'd seen him in the 4 years beforehand. So it is, a definitely a sign, that the system is absolutely broken. We cannot continue like this, right? Even if in our worst moments, when our parliament is supporting, our government is supporting a genocide, cannot opposition step up and say no? And if in that moment they can't, then I think people took it as a sign, as a catalyst that, look, we have to organize, we have to do better. We can't be a country that is, complicit in this. We pay our taxpayers' money, and our government continues to license the sale of weapons to Israel. I think for many people, that is a red line that the Labour Party will very struggle to come apart from, especially the leadership. Of course, individual MPs like Zara Sultana, we commend her efforts, and we would encourage people to continue voting for her. But as a whole, as a structure, it is not working anymore.
So, okay. So here comes the Muslim vote.
Yes.
Which you're attached to. Which I'm one of the advisors to, for transparency's sake. I'm also advising several other platforms. From your point of view, what's the idea behind this? What is the essential objective behind all of this?
It's a community empowerment. I think that's the central objective. What we've seen is the Labour Party has become very complacent. They believe that they can win the Muslim vote without any effort.
Muslims are going to vote Labour,
right?
What may, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when the first round of Muslim councillors were resigning, and we were having conversations with them and helping them write their resignation letters, etc. What we saw was the Labour Party brief saying they're shaking off the fleas, right? Very clearly, very arrogantly, that they just didn't care. They just didn't care. They thought no matter what happens, they would win the vote. And we can't let that happen. We have to, if we want policy to change, we have to use our vote as intended, right? As a means of democratic checks and balance. The Labour Party might win in 2024 without the Muslim vote. That is probably likely, but they won't win in 2029 or 2034 without the Muslim vote. This is hugely unlikely. They are going to need the support of Muslim communities in key constituencies across the country, right? We estimate there's around 80 constituencies in the country with more than 10% of the Muslim vote. This is not trivial. This is not a trivial number. So they might win 2024. They are not going to win 2029. So if we can organize our communities and say, look, we have an opportunity now, whilst everyone is politically active and engaged, to organize ourselves, to come together as a community, to see what our values are, whether it be foreign policy, NHS, cost of living, education. These are all really important. Securitization and Islamophobia. These are all really important issues to us that impact our day-to-day lives, right? So how do we organize our communities? And this is what the Muslim vote came for, right? We were like, let's help. Go to the local masajid, go to local community centers, the local leaders, councillors, and bring them together and say, okay, what do you care about? And who do you think in your constituency best represents your values? And go and vote for that person. Don't be cynical with your vote and just always vote for the lesser of two evils when that lesser of two evils is able to defend a genocide.
What's the level of engagement in that discussion? Are people aware of what you're trying to achieve? Are they aware of the fact that they have been taken for granted for far too long by Labour? Are they aware of the kind of consequences and implications of Muslims en masse leaving the Labour Party or not voting for the Labour Party or the such? Are people asking the question that they're worried, for instance, that they might seem that if they leave Labour, they'll have nowhere else to go, for instance, and that ultimately the price they'll pay is far greater than the one that they're paying right now by staying?
Yeah, I think what we've seen, and this is why this election is very unique, like you said at the start, because Same in America. The uncommitted Michigan, the campaign you referenced at the start, they have accepted Donald Trump will be their future president. They've essentially given Donald Trump a free pass into the White House because they want to send a very clear message to the Democrats in America, who are similar to Labour here, I guess, that supporting genocide has a consequence. And in comparison, Biden has been a very, very active supporter of Netanyahu and the Israeli regime. So they're sending that very clear message, and they have accepted potentially what people would argue is a worse alternative. Of the two evils, Donald Trump might be the worst of the two evils, but they want to send a very clear message. And I think we're seeing that more and more with Muslims in the UK, that they want to send a message, and they know they're not daft. People understand that the next government will be the Labour government, and they're not against people engaging with them on a strategic and a strategic level. But that doesn't mean that we have to give them our vote. A vote is a precious commodity that is given to us in a democratic system. We're only able to exercise it once every 5 years. Comparison to other parliaments, the UK Parliament is supremely powerful, right? We have parliamentary sovereignty. As seen with the Rwanda bill, our UK Parliament can just overturn what the High Court said. So we shouldn't take that vote lightly. And I think people, there are these worries, and they are very reasonable. I wouldn't dismiss them. But what I would encourage to people is that, look, work with your local community. If your best MP option in the area is a Labour MP, vote for that Labour candidate. If it is someone like Zara Sultana or Nash Shah, vote for them. I have no doubt. Or John McDonnell, Diane Abbott, or Diane Abbott's no longer in the Labour Party, but John McDonnell, vote for them. I absolutely encourage you to do so. But in areas where that MP no longer serves the interests of your whole community, not just the Muslim community, we live within our whole community, right? If they don't serve the best interests of that community at heart, find an alternative, build them up.
Is there an understanding or an awareness that political engagement isn't something that happens every 4 or 5 years by you casting a vote, but it's something that happens daily, consistently? Because, from my work, my engagements and the such, this is something I try to, to impress on people. But to be perfectly honest, I think we're still lacking that.
Absolutely.
Because people, they're taken by the spectacle of a general election, for instance, or the such, and then they jump into action. But political engagement is far more expansive than that.
Absolutely. And, as someone who's spent, 4 or 5 years between what would be the last general election and now, as a very young activist getting involved, it has been a frustration of mine, no doubt, that, our communities, Muslim communities in particular, seem to either engage from election to election or from crisis to crisis. And what we have seen right now is the crisis that re-engaged the Muslim community was the genocide in Gaza. And there are positives, like I said before. But if we were a more consistently, actively engaged community, we could have a stronger BDS campaign. The BDS bill that was just passed this year. I remember sitting with a few people who I work with and organize with, trying to get local mosques and Muslim communities to contact the MPs to oppose the bill. That bill was this close from never going through Parliament. But, if we had engaged earlier, way before the genocide in Gaza, we could have stopped that bill going through. I can't remember, around April time was when the second reading happened, and we were trying to call around and engage mosques. And then in November or December, when the bill came around for its third reading, people were like to me, "What are we doing?" And I said, "Well, we asked you back in April." So it's absolutely key that we take this as a lesson. That politics is not won in the moment of a genocide. It is one in the moments between. Right? That consistent, the discipline, the facing up to your losses and learning. And we have to change as a community. This election can't be the end of our work. We can't just turn up in another 5 years and have another Muslim vote project, because it won't be successful like that. But if we spend the next 5 years building up our local independence, then we have a real shot of causing real change, being a real force for positive in this country.
How are you finding the engagement or the reaction of mosques particularly? Because I'm interested in the case of mosques, because traditionally the majority of the groups, the Muslim groups, the ideological, the fiqhi groups, are of the inclination that mosques should stay away from politics and from getting engaged with the, voting for this party against this party or the such. How have you found the engagement of mosques this time around?
What I found in particular is an unparalleled and unseen level of unity, actually, which I'm really, really happy with. And obviously, mosques are different because a majority of them charities. They can't actively get involved in the process, and we wouldn't encourage them to do so. They should, of course, abide by Charity Commission rules, but they are very happy to give us access to their communities, for us to have conversations, and for them to do voter registration drives, etc. And there is some level of fear, I guess, for mosques that they will be targeted by the Charity Commission, etc. And those fears do need to be addressed, and we do need to have very clear guidance on how they can behave. But and there are still those mosques who aren't overly, but I think that it has changed. Yeah, it definitely has changed. Mosques are a lot more open to engaging with the Muslim community.
And again, do you think that that's essentially because of Gaza?
I think so. I think it sent a real message to us that we've not been good enough. We've messed up. We are Muslims in one of the global superpowers, right? One of Israel's strongest allies. I would probably argue whether Israel's third closest ally in the world after America and Germany, right? We're in one of their closest allies in the world, and we have an ethical responsibility to people who suffer from the votes that we might partake in. And I think that mosques have really said, okay, look, we have to re-engage, we have to be active. This is our country, this is our communities, and we have to take ownership of it.
In my local mosque, I have to say that, of course, Gaza is, as you put it, quite elementary in this kind of shift. But also something else that I noticed, and that is the pressure mounted, especially by the younger generation, on the mosque directorship and management and the such. That surely also has a role in creating this kind of shift.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a very unique moment. Much like, I don't know, obviously I was a baby when the Iraq War happened, but these are moments that they are devastating moments, but they remind us of our obligation. And I think especially with young people, they're like, what are we doing? We have and I think young people, like for example, like myself, I'm third generation British. I only see myself, we are very tied to this country. And we very much feel a sense of responsibility for where our tax money is going. And older generations are feel that they're listening to that and they're taking it on board and working together. And it's really important that we have to work together. Unity is the essence, is the key for this to be a success. We can't afford to scatter our votes.
In my past attempts to sort of organize and galvanize the vote, one of the things that I recall was always a stumbling block, and that is that when we come to the day of polling, we find out that the majority of our constituency aren't even registered to vote. So have you taken care of this? Have you considered this? The fact that many people out there, thousands, probably even tens of thousands, aren't actually registered to vote. So regardless of what they think, regardless of whether they agree with what you're calling them to do or otherwise, but they don't even have the right to vote.
No, absolutely. I think there's actually a second stumbling block in the upcoming general election, is that it'll be the first general election with the new voter ID laws. So we have to make sure that either people are educated on those ID laws, or they take care and take a postal ballot. We ran our first voter education drive just before Ramadan, the last Friday before Ramadan, working with a number of constituencies and masjids up and down the country. And what I found really positive actually was I was at a Gaza protest, one of them in London, and someone came up to me who I'd never met before in my life, never spoke to them. He hadn't even messaged the Muslim Vote, but he had organized a voter registration drive in his masjid, totally independent of us. He'd just seen the date, he'd seen the poster, he went out, he told his masajid, look, make this announcement, I've got the posters. And he did the work himself. And this is what we really need to see, right? I mean, look, we live in all different parts of the UK. I live in a very, white area of the UK. London is much more diverse than I am. I can't tell people in London, I can't come down London, Birmingham, Manchester and run all the registration drives. But alhamdulillah, what we've seen is a real level of local engagement,
And
where
the
people
fact
have
that
taken ownership.
this person that you speak of, I mean, through his local masjid, through his, I mean, for mosques to play that kind of role
Yes.
in giving advice to people, in educating them, in assisting them,
Yes.
in how to register, for instance, to check whether they're registered or not, to make sure that they have the right kind of papers and the such. I mean, surely a mosque is doing a brilliant job when doing that.
Absolutely. These are the centers of our communities, right?
Yeah.
Going back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, sometimes masjid are not just places for prayer. These are the centers of our community, of education, of places of shura, places where we engage our communities. And masjids have an absolutely vital role to ensure that our communities are empowered and that they are registered and that they're available and that they talk to them in their local languages. So, for example, there might be a local Bengali community with a lot of Bengalis. How do we get to the elders in that community? Is by speaking to them in a language they understand, right? Whether it be Urdu or Arabic or Somali, whatever language it may be for that local community. Let's get to them. Let's help them. Let's just take ownership, because this is undoubtedly uncontroversial area. They can't, the Charity Commission can't penalize them for this.
Yeah.
So, that is, I think this is where the masjids play a real role. That we have to make sure that our community is mobilized and registered, because we could do all this work, we can have all these discussions. If we're not registered,
absolutely,
the vote doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And this is where if we want MPs to take us seriously, we have to be the most registered community.
Yeah.
The highest turnout.
Yeah.
And the most powerful.
Okay, let's get down to the details. I mean, as the Muslim vote, you're advising people to vote along particular lines.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the fact that there are good MPs who stood ethically and morally correctly in terms of Gaza, and are also good MPs for their local communities, local constituencies. So, and you mentioned a few of those. In the case that there is no such, candidate, or the incumbent is someone whom you're saying that mustn't come back to Parliament if at all we could.
Yeah.
What are the alternatives? The
alternatives is take ownership locally. So a very good example of this is Redbridge Community Action Group. Leicester also had one where they had a cross community group with leaders from different communities where they selected a candidate. Preston just completed their process and selected a candidate. What they did is they came together, right? And they sat down as a community and said, okay, what are our values? What do we care about? What do we believe in? Then they sat together, put it together, and they created a process where they found, they had applications in, they filtered them out down to 3-4, then the local community held a vote, right? And this is really important because, like I said before, we can't tell you what to do centrally. We don't live in your areas, but you do. You know who the talented people are. You know who are the most politically savvy people. How can we persuade them that their future belongs in this area? Our most skilled and our brightest and our best shouldn't only be constrained to, being doctors or engineers. Yeah. They should be the leaders of our communities, right? So how do we engage them and how do we get them involved in that process? And that's what we really need to do. But it's not just selecting a candidate and then just leaving them and saying, okay, let them do what they want. We have to really mobilize behind these candidates. We have to canvass. If you're good at video editing, help them with that. If you're good at making posters, help them with that. If you're good at canvassing and speaking to people, help them with that, right? Where are my skills? Everyone has a role to play. You might be, a housewife who's very busy, who doesn't have time to go out, but have a list of 500 friends on WhatsApp. Contact them. We all have a small role to play to make real change. So that's what it is. It's thousands of small actions, right? But the first action we have to take is we have to take ownership. Okay. Work within our communities. Contact the local trade unions, the local Afro-Caribbean community, the local working class community, and say to them, look, you see a problem. It's very clear. We see a problem as well. Let's find an alternative, and then work together, find the best alternative, and then give them the best chance of if not winning now, winning in 2029.
Are you telling people to move away from Labour and for instance, go to the Greens or Lib Dems?
Again, it's not really about a particular party. It's about a set of values. You know, if the best local candidate is a Lib Dem, vote for the Lib Dem. I've talked to some people in certain areas who believe that their best alternative is a Lib Dem. You know, they live there. They've talked to the Lib Dem candidate.
What if that vote might seem to be sort of a wasted vote or a lost vote because the Lib Dem or the Green or whoever really stands no chance?
I don't.
What kind of impact do you think that'll have?
I don't really see there being any wasted vote as long as there is a united vote. I'll make this very clear. Nigel Farage, you know, not that we love the man, but Nigel Farage has been the most effective politician in this country in the last 15 years. Nigel Farage never won a seat. He won one by-election, as far as I remember. He never won a seat, but he understood the power of having block votes outside of the party that he was trying to pressure. UKIP acted as a very effective pressure group on the Conservative Party, and he got the Brexit he wanted by moving votes away from the Conservative Party, despite the fact that the Conservative Party still were in government, because they were fearful of that vote, because they knew that they had to respond to that voter base. And we can do the same. You might not win a seat. I'm not promising you we're going to win 50 seats, but we can change the party, the policy of the Labour Party. I mean, look, one of the first people to move their policies was West Streeting on the ceasefire, because that was one of the most active communities. They organised before even the Muslim vote was a thing, I believe, right? Before we'd even formally announced our project, they had already started organising. West Streeting was one of the first MPs to come out and change his tune from the Labour front bench on supporting a ceasefire, etc. So clearly it does work. We can see that. So there is no, I would really push back on this argument that there's such thing as a wasted vote. Every vote matters as long as we turn up in a big enough number and that we are unified.
I mean, there's no question that, I mean, the way you put it, that with mosques, community centers, local groups, activists of various tendencies within the Muslim communities, as well as outside of the Muslim community, because we know the pro-Palestine campaign is made up of all sections of British society. So with that kind of coordination happening amongst all those facets, I mean, you have a fantastic social movement.
Absolutely, yes. And like I said, the Muslim vote is about empowering the local Muslim community, but that local Muslim community has to work with the communities beside them, right? We live in some of the most vibrant multicultural societies, right, and communities across the country. We really should, working with them, we can make a real difference. If we can work with them and persuade them that a powerful social movement is capable, and we take leadership and ownership of this, working with them, then the Muslim community can be a real impact and force for change, positive change, real positive change. We can make sure that mother doesn't have to go to the food bank again, right? If we work to elect the right leaders, we can make sure that the innocent black child doesn't get stopped and searched for no reason. We can protect those who are stuck on a long waiting list to ensure that they get correct treatment. West Streeting wants to privatize the NHS. There's a real concern for many across the country. So we really have to work and persuade not just our own communities, but communities around us that there is a real alternative. We just have to, carry on building it up and be active between these next 5 years. Especially.
What's the position in some constituencies where we found that people look at all the candidates from all the parties and really find no one who fits the kind of bill that you mentioned, and then decide to stand as independent candidates themselves?
Absolutely.
That's going to happen.
Yep.
I mean, we have already the spectacle of the likes of Jeremy Corbyn, for instance, or those who were kicked out of Labour during that kind of farcical era that Labour went through, many of whom are standing as independent candidates. We've had George Galloway in Rochdale and his Workers' Party all of a sudden becoming a thing. And we have, the Andrew Feinsteins of this world, where Collective, for instance, is something. So we have a number of options, right? And including standing as an independent. And that's also part of engagement. It's not just voting, it's also
finding,
seeing yourself as being someone who could become a candidate.
Yeah, someone, I can't remember who said it to me. They said, when I was first considering getting more active in this work, he said, if not you, then who? It's a very simple line, right? But, a lot of the time we, in humility and in humbleness, we say, look, this is not my role. I'm not educated enough. I'm not talented enough. This is not for me to do. But, if enough people say that, then you're never going to mobilize for change, right? So if you have the requisite skills, talk to your community and work together and put yourself forward if there's no real alternative. But what we do want to ensure that there's a singular alternative that people can unite behind in a community. We don't want, workers' party standing against a strong independent, standing against a strong
Yeah,
green,
how do you work around those?
So we're in very close communication with people from across all these different movements. And we converse with them, and we're working with them to ensure that we can, ensure that there's one candidate in each seat. Now there might be places where there is a level of there's two very good candidates in the area and both won't stand down, and I can't promise you we have a magic wand to do something about that. But what I would say, there are methods, right? You can hold hustings, for example, and unite behind a candidate, whoever's strongest, choose a candidate who thinks most likely to provide a serious risk to the incumbent in that area. So there are ways, but again, it's about taking ownership locally and seeing the bigger picture and saying, look, we can't afford to have two amazing candidates. Let's get them in a room. Let's get them to agree to a process, and then let's unite behind one.
What's the kind of reaction that you're finding from the media? How are they dealing with this, the Muslim vote? I mean, it sounds, you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes and think of this. And this is, quite alarming, no?
Yeah, it's the media's reaction has been cynical. I'll say that. The ordinary person, if they were, worried, absolutely, I could understand. And we would have conversations with them and reassure them that we're not trying to, as
take over
as they try to tie together this application for a Muslim party. We have nothing to do with that. I have no intention of setting up no Muslim party in this country, and I would implore anyone not to even think of such ideas. It's just a very bad idea. But what I would say is, the media have been very, very cynical in an attempt to attack us, and I always take these as compliments, to be honest, because they only attack those who they see as threats. Yeah. And they see us as threats for positive change.
Those with impact.
Yes, exactly. And I think we can make a lot of positive change. Like I said, we can work with our communities and create better communities around us. I have absolutely no doubt about this. And if the Daily Mail's attacking us, then I'll say Alhamdulillah.
That's Alhamdulillah.
That's a badge of honor, And if,
but in all seriousness, to be attacked for organizing a vote that contributes towards the democratic process,
absolutely,
is fairly absurd.
Absolutely, They try to make these claims that Muslims don't see themselves as part of Britain, and then when they organize as part of democratic, one of the most fundamental British values, they say this is a threat. That's fairly ridiculous. I genuinely believe the Muslim vote will, and the local groups that set up in each area will mobilize and increase the voter turnout for Muslims in these areas. That can only be a positive thing. More people engaging in the democratic process is a good thing for the country, is good for the Muslim community, and it will be a good thing for the people around that community, because we want to rally behind candidates who stand for justice.
I have to say that from my own experience, and I'm traveling virtually every day, every other day, attending meetings and speaking to people. And one thing that I am always struck by is the fact that, most of my audiences are non-Muslim, by the way.
Yeah.
And people come up to me virtually every day and ask me about the Muslim vote. Who are you going to endorse in this particular constituency? Who are you standing by? In fact, people saying, we're not going to endorse anyone until you do. And, when a candidate comes up to them and says, I'm standing in this area, they say, well, have you been endorsed by the Muslim vote? And if you haven't yet, well, we need to wait as well. That level of coordination is something that personally I haven't experienced in the past. And it's something that speaks highly, I believe, not only of the platform itself, the Muslim vote, but also of the idea and the concept behind it, and the kind of drive to this wide level coordination, wide level collaboration between all facets of communities, whether it be local or national.
Absolutely. And it's really positive to see that people, including the Muslim vote, hopefully are happy to put their ego aside and unite behind a candidate that can unite communities, right? It's not all about, so we've had this question sometimes, like, are you endorsing non-Muslims or are you endorsing Muslims?
Yeah.
And, I laugh because one of the first candidates that we worked with was Pamela Fitzpatrick, right?
Yeah.
Who's not Muslim, but the work she has done in her local community is extraordinary.
Absolutely.
She's a brilliant woman and she's done amazing work. And and the person running against her is a conservative Muslim, right? So one of the people running against her. So this is not about about any given just because you're Muslim you're better.
The same is happening in Keir Starmer's constituency, where I believe that we're going to be backing Andrew Feinstein, who's not only not a Muslim, he's a Jew.
Yes.
And one of his, opponents happens to be a Muslim.
Yes, and we strongly believe you have to choose the best alternative, the most principled alternative. If you look at Andrew Feinstein and his previous career and the work he's done with the ANC in South Africa and his work in anti-apartheid, is absolutely outstanding candidate. And we have to support those who have proven their moral principles. Right? And Andrew has absolutely done this. And Pamela, with her work in the last 13 years, with the work she does in the local Harrow community, has proven that. So it's not just about. It's really about values. Do you stand by the values that are best for our country? Right. Are best for Britain. Are best to cater for the poor,
and that's why precisely we. I mean, one of the issues that we're asking every candidate is about their local manifesto, about what they're going to do about health within their constituency, about transportation within their community, about schools and education, about all matters that concern everyone. I mean, we spoke about food banks and the fact that poverty is now something which lingers over the heads of millions of Britons, Muslims and none. And that's something that whoever stands must have some sort of position on.
Absolutely.
Must be able to negotiate, must be able to discuss, to argue, and to present some real solutions.
Absolutely. And housing is one of those big issues, right?
Yes,
and for people across the country, housing has become, especially in London, just absolutely unaffordable.
Anyone who's tried to rent an apartment or a house in the past 3 years, I'm sure has experienced some really horrific procedures and processes, and ultimately probably never found what they're looking for.
Absolutely. So how do we solve these issues? Do we solve them by continuing the status quo, unimaginative government, a Labour Party led by Keir Starmer, who seems to go back on his every promise he's made for the since he's become leader, who week to week just bows down to the pressure of the mainstream media? Or do we find real alternatives who can put pressure on the Labour Party from the outside by forming a real alternative threat, where the Labour Party thinks, okay, if we don't provide more just solutions, if we don't cater for the people, then we will lose their votes. So how do we do that? And this is where the independent movement, the Green movement, working with whoever it is, whoever provides that best alternative, will really give us a platform to form a more just society.
I mean, before the general elections will happen, we're going to have the local elections, the mayoral elections, as well as some local elections in around 100 constituencies. And the London mayoral elections is one of the biggest in the world, potentially, especially that we're talking about the second most important executive position in the country, with a huge budget amounting to around £20 billion every single year, and with the authority to basically run one of the greatest cities, capitals in the entire world. We have had now Sadiq Khan for the past 2 terms, right? This is going to be his 3rd attempt. He's Labour, and from the figures seems to be fairly comfortable in terms of the outcome. I don't think that the Conservatives or anyone else really pose a serious threat to him winning. What are you advising people to do regarding this? I mean, do you endorse Sadiq Khan because he's a Muslim, he prays in his local mosque? He's been fairly good as mayor, I mean, one could say. But at the same time, he's Labour. And a few of his positions have been dubious, to say the very least, if not absolutely contentious and problematic. What are you telling people to do?
Right now, we don't have a central position on this. We're a very new initiative. We only started back in November. We didn't have time to organize for both local and national elections. So I wouldn't give a central recommendation, but I can give a few reflections on how people can use their vote here. And I would say, don't give anyone your vote just because they're Muslim. Don't give anyone your vote just because you think they're going to win. Really make them earn your vote. I think this is the crux of what we're trying to do.
This goes for everyone.
Yes, absolutely.
Not?
Absolutely.
I mean, everyone whom you propose to back in the elections, you must have a word with them and say, listen, I am going to give you a vote, and this
is what we want.
The agreement between you and I. This is a contract.
Yes.
I'm going to vote for you because I expect this, and this.
Absolutely, yes. So we have to, that work has to be, it seems quite inevitable that Sadiq Khan might win. But doesn't mean that we can't go to him, local communities, wherever part in London, doesn't stop you from going to him and say, look, we're suffering from this problem. What is your proposed solution? There might be certain parts of London, compared to a lot of the country, London has amazing, public transport networks. How affordable it is for certain people is a question well worth asking. How we engage with politics has to be under that frame. This is an agreement between myself and the person that I elect in, that I'm electing in you. So you serve not just me, not on a selfish level, that you serve the community that we live in. And you try and make that community a better community, a stronger community. How are you going to tackle the problems around us? So that's my only advice. Don't just say to someone, "Oh, Sadiq Khan's getting my vote because he's Sadiq Khan." No, challenge him and ask him. Look, if you want my vote, I want to vote for you, but tell me why I should vote for you. And once that process has been done, once you've engaged and taken serious consideration, then cast your vote for whoever is best. And if you don't believe Sadiq Khan is best, talk to the alternatives. I believe Green Party are standing a candidate at this election in the London mayoral elections. Find out more about them, understand their policy, their positions, see if they have a serious chance of building a future movement, right? Like in Bristol Central and West, where they potentially are going to win the seat at 20 in the current election. They've been organizing there for 8 years. Since 2015, I believe, and now they're finally going to win it. So, do you believe there's a chance that you can help build up a candidate for future elections? These are all questions that you have to ask before you just, give your vote, put serious consideration into it.
A central theme of what you and I are trying to do through all of this is an element of educating the public, everyone, as to the importance of their vote, but also the importance that they really engage. They just don't cast their vote simply because someone told them that this is the best candidate, or maybe they know them personally, or maybe they like the fact that they look in a particular way. It's a sort of an intelligent decision based on a discussion, based on negotiation, based on research. In a way, and this is something that, again, because some of my work involves the Arab world, which we know is absolutely void from democracy. And one of the things I constantly try to impress on people is the fact that citizens are the boss.
Absolutely.
Citizens are the boss. There is that, unfortunately, that's upside down, inverted sort of relationship when you talk about oppressive countries that are run by authoritarian regimes, that everyone fears, the president, the king, the prime minister, whoever's in charge. when in actual fact, public servants are simply that.
Yeah.
They serve the public. And therefore, when we vote for whoever in our constituency, or when we vote for whoever's going to be the mayor of our city, we're electing them to serve us, and they are accountable to us, and we must hold them responsible for their decisions and the such. That kind of understanding of the relationship, I believe, is lacking to a large extent, and it needs to be inserted in the whole attitude of how we approach this.
100%. Politicians should genuinely fear the ballot box.
Yeah.
And I think right now, the Labour and Conservative Party don't fear the ballot box because they believe it's going to be one or the other, right? And probably rightly so at the moment. And we have to work to change that system, and whilst we're in the constraints of the first past the post system, that means working on a very local level, working with our communities, engaging a broad range of people, and really trying to build up alternative candidates, independents who aren't tied by, party policy in some areas, some who might be, like I said, there'll be a broad range of opportunities depending on the constituency you're in. But, really challenging the status quo. We can't simply continue to allow Labour and Conservative to have a unique monopoly on our electoral system. And it's been broken before. I think sometimes people get, despondent and they believe that change is not possible. But people forget only 100 years ago, Liberals were the biggest party in this country.
Yeah.
So the Labour movement managed to break through by working with unions and going to the real grassroots. And if we do that again, if we really engage our communities, work with people, all who've been abandoned by the main two parties, I think this goes without exception, to be honest, apart from if you're in the top 1%. Even the middle class now are struggling to pay rent, right, or pay their mortgages. So everyone has been let down by this system. So how can we provide a real alternative if we just simply keep doing the same thing? We have to change our behavior and go for those who stand with our values.
How much do you think that part of this is challenged by the prevalence of anti-Muslim racism, of Islamophobia? Either, the systemic kind that we find within the authorities, the police, the Westminster media and the such, and what's on the streets. And the way that, for instance, the way that the media cover. I have no problem whatsoever in saying that at the very heart of, the likes of the Daily Mail or Daily Telegraph, when they address with contempt the Muslim vote, is an issue of Islamophobia. I have no problem in being absolutely certain that that's the case. But generally speaking, in the kind of challenges that you face in bringing out people, organizing them, having them, liaise and collaborate in the way that you've mapped out, how much of this is a problem?
There's a challenge on two levels here. The first level being, there are people who simply refuse to engage with Muslim communities because they think we do harm to the country. And, that's because the government, the media have spun a narrative that this is true. And again, on an individual level, can we work with them? Can we, continue to break down these barriers? That's long-term work that we absolutely, can work on, and it will take time and it takes effort. But, on an Islamic level, I say, continue to show your best of character. Engage with these people on the grassroots level. I'm not talking about leadership, but on a grassroots level, deal with them with the best of character. Continue, knock on their house, invite them to do Ramadan with you, feed them on Eid Day, etc. Continue to show them best of character, and inshallah, over time, their hearts will soften and stuff. So, that is one challenge there. But I think the greater challenge, and the challenge that we and the Muslim vote can hopefully help overcome, is that there'll be Muslims who are reluctant to rock the boat because they are scared of the repercussions. They are scared that they will be accused of trying to infiltrate, and that they'll be attacked and maligned, and especially our Muslim sisters, very visibly Muslim, get attacked on the street, right? That is a challenge that we're going to have to overcome. And we will continue to work to empower our communities, inshallah, and give them that level of confidence that, this is not being separate to the community. This is the firm establishment of British values in the most pure sense, that we have an opportunity once every 5 years to make our voices heard. Let's work together. Let's work with our broader communities and let's really make that happen.